Chris Carter here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. We got Josh Taylor on today, and we want to ask the question, what should the Steelers do with Nick Herbig? His contract is coming up, and the Steelers are already paying TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith. Should the Steelers trade Herbig, or should they trade someone else? That and more here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find this show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day, because we're your team every day. And a reminder, the Locked On Steelers podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is now the #1 sports podcasting network in the world. As I said before, we're joined by the man himself, Josh Taylor. He's back in the building from KDKA TV. We always love to have Josh on the show. Josh, I want to talk to you about this outside linebacker position for the Steelers right now, because it is one of the true assets of the team. Maybe arguably the most complete depth chart of the team when you consider TJ Watt. Granted, he hasn't been his elite self for a little bit here, but he's still a very high-level player. Alex Highsmith, obviously looking pretty strong, maybe entering his prime right now. Nick Herbig looking like he deserves to be a starter with how well he's played throughout the season. And then even rookie Jack Sawyer had a pretty strong rookie season when he was filling in. That's 4 guys on the edge there. But now you have a decision that you're coming down to with Nick Herbig's contract. The Steelers, as it currently stands, are projected to have about $44.9 million in cap space for next season. And granted, next season is not the big one they need to worry about. They have a lot of cap space in 2027 as it stands, $158 million in cap space. So they have wiggle room to play around with who they sign to keep around from what looks to be a very strong 2023 draft class that Nick Herbig was part of. But again, going into Nick Herbig's situation right now, he's been a $1 million cap hit pretty much for his entire time with the Steelers. This last year, upcoming in 2026, he'll be a $1.3 million cap hit. I guarantee you, whether he's on the Steelers or not, he's going to be making a lot more money than that in 2027. My question to you, Josh, should the Steelers make every effort to keep Nick Herbig, or should they use him to find answers somewhere else?
I would find every possible way you can to keep him. You laid out a good reason to try to keep him, because he should be very affordable for you in 2027.
Yes,
it should be very simple for you to figure this out. And this is one of those deals that they may not even need to wait till training camp to get figured out, because you already know he has a year left on his deal. You know you're going to have plenty of space to sign him for 2027. You can get this one wrapped up maybe beginning of the league year if you really felt that way about it on March 11th. It should be really easy to do. I think the harder question would be, if you're going to sign him, how are you going to maximize the value that you're going to get by paying him? That's the tougher question. It's not a question you're going to settle off the field. It's one you're going to try to settle on the field. But outside of that, I think keeping him is a no-brainer. And it kind of opens up the possibility, assuming that Alex Highsmith and TJ Watt are going to be around, it opens up the possibility of you being a little bit more creative with Nick Herbig. And it doesn't just have to involve third downs. But yeah, I'm of the belief that if you can do whatever you can to keep Nick Herbig, especially while he's affordable, especially while you have plenty upon plenty of cap space to be able to afford a position like that. And let's not kid ourselves. Edge rusher has become a premium position as far as paying players on defense.
Yeah.
And you're in the position to do that, considering the fact that you're going to have a lot of younger guys on contracts here in the next couple of years. You might as well seize the opportunity while you can and use that to your advantage.
I agree. Use it to your advantage while you can, and build with the group that you have. And I think something else that we touched on earlier this week, looking at the Steelers roster, we were looking at, if you look at Locked On NFL scouting, with our guys Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino, they pointed out that the Steelers might have the best young nucleus in the NFL of players who are still on rookie contracts. And when you look at that and you look at guys, this all goes back to the 2023 draft class, the first year of Omar Khan's and Andy Weidel's tenure as GM and assistant GM. Broderick Jones, Joey Porter Jr., Keanu Benton, Darnell Washington, Nick Herbig, Corey Trice, Spencer Anderson. I mean, down the line, everyone except Corey Trice, who's been hurt, has been useful to this team. Broderick Jones, though not an elite tackle by any means just yet, was a decent left tackle this year and is, we were talking about this earlier this week. I think they should be trying to keep him at least through his 5th-year option to see what he's got as he continues to grow. Joey Porter Jr. is looking like a shutdown cornerback. He hasn't allowed a touchdown since he became a starter. Keanu Benton, not a star defensive tackle just yet, but a playmaker in the middle and a difference maker when he's there. Darnell Washington, a big difference maker at tight end. We're talking about Nick Herbig and even Spencer Anderson, a 7th-round pick, has been a serviceable, useful offensive lineman as the extra guy that comes on as the extra eligible blocker or a fill-in guard when they've needed him. This has been a heck of a class to build with, and I think that when you look at that and then the other guys that are behind them, Fautanu, Frazier, Peyton Wilson, Mason McCormick, and then this year with Derek Harmon, Jack Sawyer, Y.A. Black, and we'll see what comes of Caleb Johnson and Will Howard. But they are assembling a new, young, talented group of guys to build around. And I think Nick Herbig is, might be among the best when it comes to value per pick, because Herbig looks like a dangerous pass rusher when he's on the field. And before the first 2 years, I thought he's still a big liability in the run game. But this year, he was not that liability. He got so much better in that regards. And when I saw that, that's making me think the only way you're giving this guy up is if someone is overpaying for him in the trade market. And we'll get to that later. But to your point, you keep guys like that around, especially when you're a team that's building for the future right now.
You talk about Nick Herbig as a value guy as far as, what you're getting per pick. I'd make the same case for Darnell Washington. It's the same scenario. These are two guys that you're getting tremendous value for where you pick them at and for what they're doing now. And I'll say that to say this, looking at that entire 2023 draft class, if the toughest decision you have to make on who to retain in a draft class is your 1st-round guy, you probably did really good with that draft class.
Yeah.
If you got to make the most decision, take the most thought to make a decision of, is this the guy that we are really on the fence about? And that's your 1st-round pick because the rest of them are either no-brainers or incomplete grades. You did really, really well with that class. And I'm saying that in theory. We know what the results are because we've seen what the results are on the field. It's clearly obvious that they got a lot of value, a lot of guys in this class. So, yeah, I think that really does speak to the job that they did in 2023. And it really did set a very strong foundation for the 2 drafts that came after it as far as what they were able to do. And you and I have been talking about this for months now. Rebuilding that offensive line, rebuilding that defensive line. You and I have agreed on this probably since it was first became a priority that they needed to completely rebuild, if not reload in the trenches. And they've done that with the last 3 draft classes on both sides of the ball. They've completely flipped the tight end position. They've completely changed the depth situation at corner with Joey Porter. They've completely changed the outside linebacker position with both Herbig and Jack Sawyer. All of these things happened in a matter of a couple of drafts. So it does really echo, I think, what Krabs and Marino are talking about. Yeah, you got a really good nucleus of guys here. And these are guys that have all seen time in the past couple seasons. I mean, even some of the guys from the 2025 draft, even notwithstanding. So it really does add up to, hey, how long can you keep this group together? And more importantly, how much more can you get out of them moving forward?
I agree. I think it's trying to get the most out of them. But let's explore that in our next segment, the question about how to handle a trade if you wanted to trade. Because, again, this is not a Steelers team. We said this last year. I said this year before. These are not Steelers teams that are going to be serious Super Bowl contenders. They're teams that can be good contenders, that can be on their way up. But this is still a team that you're building a roster for the next couple of years for when you find some of the right pieces to finally put it together. And I think with that consideration, you do want to consider how do you maximize value, and trades being on the table is one way to do that. We'll talk about trade possibilities next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Josh Taylor, stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I want to remind you this show is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Welcome to the 5 Hour Energy Flavor Draft. We're looking at every aspect of the draft to let you know which tasty flavors are the best and which just might be the sleepers. The board is set, the flavors are ready, and only one is going to take the top spot. 5 Hour Energy has a wide variety of flavors, something for everyone. Among the top flavors this year is Confetti Craze. It's a delicious blend of rich, buttery, freshly baked confetti cake, smooth vanilla frosting, and a sprinkle of sweetness in every sip. But watch out for Cotton Candy for its delicious swirl of sugary clouds with a fruity twist and a hint of vanilla. And another big contender this year is Hawaiian Breeze, made with passion fruit, orange, and guava flavors. It's sweet, smooth, and tangy and tart all in one. Find your favorite flavor of 5 Hour Energy shots available at 5hourenergy.com or on Amazon. We're also brought to you by Indeed. Workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, inbox overflowing, and the one position you have to fill is still sitting open. When the pressure's on, you need the right hire. This is a job for sponsored jobs. Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for: skills, experience, location, so you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Spend less time searching, more time actually interviewing candidates. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire. This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter here with Josh Taylor. Josh, let's go over this question that I have for you here. You said the Steelers should sign Nick Herbig. Does that mean that the Steelers should trade one of their outside linebackers and try to get some extra value to spread around and add to the future of this team if they're keeping Nick Herbig?
Yes, but for the right offer. I'm not trading a guy just to get rid of him, because there's this whole thing where, and I don't know where this started. I don't know who this started with, but I wish that person really hadn't said this out loud, because there's this whole dynamic to where if you have more than one or two guys at a position, that you're just immediately supposed to trade the excess, because clearly it's something you can use for something else. And my thing is, they've done that in the past. They trade the excess, and then someone in the top two, in the two deep, gets hurt, and then you don't have anybody to replace them, and then they're blaming everybody else except for the thought of trading the excess. So I don't think you just do it for the sake of doing it because you think you have too many people. I think you do it because someone comes with an offer that's so ridiculous you can't say no. Do I expect them to get a Micah Parsons type offering where you get a starter and 2 first-round picks? No. But if there is an offer that is just ridiculous, relevant to the player in question, whether it is a Nick Herbig or an Alex Highsmith or a TJ Watt, I think Omar Khan has to listen, especially in a draft where he's already got 12 draft picks. But if you can do a very strong scenario where you can get a guy back and maybe a pick swap is involved and an extra one on top of that, that's something you got to think about. That's something you definitely take into consideration. So, yeah, I'm not going to say just trade a guy for the sake of trading him. I'm going to say trade him because the value you get back is you get back is just so good, and it can help you that much more that you just can't say no.
Again, the whole thing here, the reason I'm broaching this, it's not because I think the Steelers absolutely should send any one of these guys away. I think TJ Watt has still got it. I think he's still a bad man when it comes to lining up on the edge. I think Alex Highsmith has really come into his own. He's entering his prime, and I think it would be great to reap the benefits of that on the field and see that manifest on the field. And like I said, I think they should re-sign Nick Herbig and keep him because he's 25 years old. You're about to get 4 more years of this guy probably playing like this and then improving with each year. That you want to be part of that and have that on your team. You hit with that 4th round pick there. But here's the thing, Josh, if you're looking at what the future could be, and again, Jack Sawyer also fitting into this well as another good, fourth round pick that they've made, who I think that he had a pretty solid season. If I'm looking at how these guys have fit, and I'm saying to myself, what's an asset that we can move if we see something that really works for us? Like, for example, we've been talking about these superstar players that they can add to their team in this draft class, and we've been talking about the cost of it. Like, if they wanted to move up into the top 10 to get, Caleb Downs or Sonny Styles or Mekhi Lemon, one of those guys, but it's going to cost a second and a third. You don't want to give up all that because you want to get your picks in the top 100. What if it's a third and Alex Highsmith? What if it's just Nick Herbig? That's the question that I think you have to broach here, is who you're trying to move. And I think when you're looking at those three guys, and again, the reason why I'm looking at the outside linebackers is because they have an abundance of talent at this position, and you finally have depth there. And I don't think you want to just, like you said, don't throw it away just to throw it away. Chris Carter is the first people to tell you, and the last people to stay in the room to keep arguing about. You don't trade, you don't just change just to change. You change with a strategy. You move people on with the hey, this is what we think we can get. You have the plan in hand when you walk into the room to make the decision. You're not just jumping out without a parachute and hoping that you catch one in midair on your way down. Not a good strategy. And so this is not me saying that they should just definitely do this right now just to get rid of this guy. But I do think that if someone calls offering you, if a team that's a contender right now, like if the Rams called and said, look, man, we got 2 first-round picks this year. We want a bad man off the edge. We will give you a first-round pick for Alex Highsmith. That's a tough one, man. I'd be really intrigued by what would that kind of return be for that. If someone calls and says they want TJ Watt, someone calls that's what I think the Steelers need to be prepared for, because I do think this is going to be a season of wheeling and dealing for Omar Khan. I do think that there is going to be, I don't know if it's going to be outside linebacker, but I do think there's going to be moves made that shake things up a bit and continue to pile up the assets for the Steelers as they try to rebuild themselves into a team that is a Super Bowl contender.
That last point you bring up, I think, is the most operative one. And honestly, there aren't many guys that I would consider to be untouchable. I think, there's only a handful of guys that I would say, you know what, I really want to keep him long term. Everybody else, you could think of a scenario in your head where it's just like, okay, I'd part with this guy and see what they get back. So if I'm Omar Khan, I'm totally paying attention to that. I think it's definitely a possibility and a strong one. The thing I wonder is, A, who your potential trade partners are going to be. B, right. What part of the draft is this happening in? Is this a team trying to move up in the first round? Is this team trying to slot back in the first round? Or are they coming up maybe day 2 trying to acquire a guy that maybe they had a first round grade on that somehow slipped down to the third round? So now you're talking about, the circumstances really dictating everything. But those circumstances are what give you leverage if you're an Omar Khan in that situation, the urgency of what the team is trying to do with the pick to get that player. So all of that comes into play. And I'll say all that with the caveat of, hey, bear in mind, whatever trade you make, you don't have to worry about taking on cap hit because you already know what you're dealing with in 2027. So if you have a guy whose contract might have multiple years on it, it might be backloaded. That gives the Steelers even more possibility to scan down the list of, hey, who might be attractive for us here? Because even if they got a little money on the contract, because maybe that's why the team's trying to unload a contract that might be too heavy on the back end. Well, you know what? If that's a position that we can use, we could take that on now, knowing down the road we have that space. So there's a lot of different variables, and it's a rare situation. You and I talked about this during the season. It's a rare situation that they're in where you have that much flexibility, as far as flexibility in picks, flexibility in cap space, flexibilities in guys that you can move. It really just becomes, it's no longer a flow chart. It becomes a kaleidoscope as far as things you can do.
Yeah, I think that's the thing here, is that I like that term kaleidoscope of what you can do, because there's a lot of different paths you can go. And this is the point of the draft and being successful in the draft and in free agency and being able to move forward, is you need to be able to perceive several different potential things that could come to pass. You have to be fluid. You have to be, light on your feet. And the second that something, because there's too many other teams out there that are trying to, outdo you. And there could be something that happens there. Or a player could get hurt. A player could say, I don't want to play here anymore. A player could say, I don't want to play over here anymore. And you're like, I want that guy to come over here. So you have to be ready for those types of things. And that's where exploring these types of questions, I think, are important, just to kind of set the stage, because make no mistake, Omar Khan is not getting through this offseason without multiple trades. I think that we've seen some boring Steelers off seasons. I don't think this is going to be one. I think this is going to be a year where Omar Khan is wheeling, is dealing. I'm not saying he's going to come off with 6 different trades and you're going to see a complete flip of the roster, but I'm saying there's going to be some moves. I know there's going to be some draft day moves. There's no way they're sitting tight with all 12 of their picks and just moving out. This is going to be a year where I think Omar Khan does some shaking up some things and tries to get some things moving. And it's more on par with what he's done, because they have to keep flipping things until they get the roster that they really like. So I think watch out for that, because that's going to be something here. And oftentimes when you're in a position group that's heavy on talent and is deep, that's the position group you might look to and say, maybe we flip one of these to fix our problems somewhere else. That's what I just think could be coming down the line. But I talked about how deep this offense outside linebacker group is. I want to compare and see, is this the deepest outside linebacker group in the modern Steelers era? I want to talk about that with Josh Taylor, but next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Josh Taylor, stick with us. We'll be right back.
Hey, it's Matt Derry from the Locked On Lions podcast. The people I love depend on me. If I'm gone, the financial responsibilities don't disappear. I didn't want my family figuring things out during the hardest moment of their lives. That's why I knew only one place to go. I chose life insurance through my friends at Ethos. Ethos makes getting life insurance fast and easy, 100% online. You can get a quote in seconds, apply in minutes, and get same-day coverage. There's no medical exam. You just answer a few simple health questions. You can get up to $3 million in coverage. Some policies are as low as $30 a month. I love the folks at Ethos. Protect your family with life insurance from Ethos now by going to ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. In as little as 10 minutes, you can get the free quote and up to $3 million in coverage at ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. That is ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. Ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. Application times and rates may vary.
We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Josh Taylor of KDKA TV. Josh, let's talk more about the depth of this group. Again, going over it, you got a former defensive player of the year in TJ Watt, who's still playing at a high level. He's not defensive player of the year candidate anymore, but he's still a bad man on the edge. Alex Highsmith, who is playing at a high level. The two of them make one of the best 1-2 punches, and maybe the best 1-2-3 punch in the NFL when you consider Nick Herbig. Oh, and by the way, you got Jack Sawyer, the rookie, who really came up big this year with some turnovers and looked like he was fitting in nicely. Josh, I was thinking about it, and I was going back through Steelers history. I don't think I've ever seen a group as deep at outside linebacker in the history of the Steelers playing the 3-4 defense as this group.
I have 2 answers to that. One, you go back about 20 years to that Super Bowl 40 group where you knew they had 3 reliable guys, Joey Porter, Clark Hagans, and James Harrison. Mm-hmm. I'd say you can go back 30 years. I'd say you can go back to that 1995 team. And this is something that I discussed with Brian Batko on a separate podcast last week. They were talking about we had a Valentine's Day show talking about famous couples, and I brought up Greg Lloyd and Kevin Green as being the 2 outside guys on that Super Bowl 30 team. Well, here's the thing: they had 2 very capable backups, in Jason Gilden, who eventually became the franchise sack leader at one point, and Chad Brown, who became the guy who replaced Kevin Green on the outside. So you had a really talented group with those four guys. And granted, Chad Brown was playing inside that year, but eventually moved outside, and that kind of launched his career as a linebacker. So I go back to that group of four. That's the gold standard for me, is those four guys.
I think that's a great recall there. I was trying to think of the time for Porter and Gilden when they became starters. I think maybe Carlos Edmonds, was he one of the guys in that group? Or was he an inside linebacker? I'm mixing. Yeah, I think
Carlos was inside. Yeah.
He was inside, but 90. That's a great poll going back even further, because my first thought was 2005 was when I looked at Joey Porter, James Harrison, Clark Hagan's, like that crew. But again, like you're talking about TJ Watt, who, for all things considered, like James Harrison, when he played for the Steelers and he was in his prime, I felt like this is the best 3-4 edge rusher I have ever seen wear a Steelers uniform. He just destroys everything in his path. He's a monster. He eats people. Like he's just unstoppable. Look at his sack numbers. It's ridiculous. James Harrison's best year is like the fourth best year for TJ Watt. When you look at it, like that's how good TJ Watt has been. Not just good. That's how elite TJ Watt has been. I think James Harrison's best year is was 16 sacks. TJ Watt's best years are 22 and a half and 19. Like that's how crazy that is for that he's been. And so like, well, I'm just like, wow. And you put that into perspective. And then again, when you add Alex Highsmith in and what he's been able to do, and now you see what Nick Herbig's bringing to the table, and then you're excited about how Jack Sawyer could grow. This is an extremely deep group, and this could be a special time for the Steelers with this position. And again, I think that's why they need to capitalize on it. Omar Khan has been very good, I think, at looking forward and making moves. And hey, some of them haven't worked. We talked about just the other week about how the safety position, obviously giving up Minkah Fitzpatrick, and he might be available. We'll talk about that in tomorrow's episode with Jenna Harner. But obviously, giving up Minkah for Jalen and Jonnu didn't work out. But at the same time, there's been lots of other moves that he has worked out, and it continues to bolster this young core that they're putting together. And I think that's where, again, you're not going to hit on every shot, but you trust the group that's hitting on most of them. And I think most of them are hitting right now.
I think he is in a very, very good position to. And you mentioned how there's a possibility, how you think there's going to be a lot of trades this offseason. If there's a time when Omar Khan is totally going to be true Omar coming, walk around the corner with the shotgun under the trench coat, it's this offseason. If there's a time he's going to do it, this is the chance you do it. And it's honestly, I'd be surprised if he didn't. I'd be surprised if they didn't find a way to, if he's not moving one of those edge rushers, I think he's finding a way to complement them with another interior guy. I think if he's not trying to find a corner or a safety, he's probably trying to draft a corner or a safety within the first couple of days. I think there's so much out there as far as potential and certain opportunities that they could have. Yeah, how long have we been talking about they need somebody to complement DK Metcalf? You might have a shot at drafting one. You might have a chance of trading for one. You might be able to find one in free agency. You have a lot of different opportunities here as far as filling needs. And let's not kid ourselves. There are a lot of guys walking around the door in free agency. So it's not like they are, tight for a budget as far as what they're looking for. There are a lot of needs that they need to check off. So he's walking in with a pretty long shopping list, but it also turns out he's got a pretty big cart and can run up a pretty big tab while doing it. So it's a good, advantageous position to be in. But to bringing it back to what you were talking about with the outside linebacker group, yeah, when you have a guy like TJ Watt, who's been a defensive player of the year, multiple defensive player of the year, Hall of Fame candidate, guy like Highsmith, who has Pro Bowl caliber talent, guy like Herbig, who has Pro Bowl caliber talent, and that's not counting what Jack Sawyer could become, because I think he's a guy who can have an impact on the run game as well as the pass game. If you're going to be lining up on the strong side, that's what you want, and I'm with you on that. This is one of the deeper groups we've seen, That's why my mind calls back 30 years to future Hall of Famer, first team All Pro in Greg Lloyd in 95, and then Chad Brown, who was a first team All Pro when he moved to the outside in 1996. And then Jason Gilton becomes the all-time sack leader eventually for the franchise. This is the group that you're talking about as far as what those guys did. So as far as potential of what a group can be, that's your bar. But this might be the closest you can find to reaching that bar. So yeah, do you want to maximize the value of those guys? Yes. But here's the fun part. You can either maximize it on the field, or you can maximize it over the phone and the deal you can make. It really does become a strength more or less than a weakness. And that's not often you can do such a thing. And if you're Omar Khan, you're looking at every possibility. You were looking at every potential route to check off everything on that long shopping list you got with that big old cart.
I agree entirely. We're going to call it here, but before we do, I want to address something that happened yesterday that I think is important to talk about when it comes to Steelers history. That's the passing of Steelers safety Mike Wagner. If you're unfamiliar, Mike Wagner, 4-time Super Bowl champion, 2-time Pro Bowler, key member of that 70s secondary, was an 11th round pick back when there were 11 rounds of the NFL draft, and came on, eventually became a key starter for that Steelers defense of the 70s, led the NFL with 8 interceptions in 1973. Not that I was around to watch the 70s, but when I watched the documentaries and the things that come back, Mike Wagner, his interception of Roger Staubach in Super Bowl 10, one of the bigger plays of that game, which was the Steelers' second Super Bowl and their back-to-back Super Bowl wins. It was. I just remember watching him explaining it on the America's Game documentary as a kid.
Yes,
and him talking about Roger Staubach, he got us in the first quarter with this play, and I said the next time I see this, I'm gonna jump all over it. And he said I saw that same motion again in the second half, and I said I'm not messing it up this time. And he jumped it, intercepted. It was a huge play in what was one of the best Super Bowls of that era.
I was just going to say, it's probably one of the best ever played.
Yeah, one of the best that's ever been played. All the highlight reels from it. But Josh, I think that there's a lot that gets lost when people talk about another 70s Steeler. But some of these guys were really special, and Mike Wagner came across as one of the ones that doesn't get enough appreciation.
Oh yeah, when you have so many guys to pick from that were such high caliber, there are still some they may not be Hall of Fame, but they might be Hall of really, really good guys, or just Hall of really solid performers that you kind of get lost in the shuffle. And this is why I keep telling people the 70s Steelers, you can keep looking for a way to duplicate it. You're not going to. It's just the way they put that roster together and the way they collected talent. It's just so rare. You don't see it now. It's not going to happen a second time. And Mike Wagner is one of the shining examples of that on 4 Super Bowl teams. And he's not probably one of the top 5 or 6 guys you talk about on those teams, but he was just as equally as important as you mentioned it. And I will say that I had the brief opportunity to interact with Mike Wagner. This was almost 20 years ago when I was first starting out in this industry. I was starting out as a producer, and we did a couple Steelers pregame shows, and we had Mike Wagner come in just to do some chalk talk, like film study type work, and could not have been more gracious. Really nice guy to talk to. Love talking about football, love breaking things down. And you saw just how much respect he had, not only for the game of football, but for the Steelers organization. And he talked about just, how much he loved and appreciated and just enjoyed being a Steeler, because being part of that group was, they knew how special what they were doing was, but they also knew how unique that collection of guys was to have them together. Not only for what they did on the field, but how they got along off the field, and the guys that they had leading them, like Chuck Noll, who was as much of a teacher as he was a disciplinarian. And he always remembered how special that group was being together, knowing that, when those days ended, they weren't going to see anything like that in their lives ever again.
Yeah, truly special stuff there. Mike Wagner, rest in peace. He passed away at 76 years old, a Steelers legend through and through. I'm sure there will be some things dedicated to him during this next season at Acrisure Stadium throughout the year. So had to pay him homage on this Locked On Steelers podcast. But Josh, thank you for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let people know they can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Social media, Josh Taylor HD. Simplest way to do it. As far as at work, every night, Monday through Friday, 7:30 KDKA TV, 10 o'clock KDKA Plus. You will find me at the news desk. That's what I'm doing these days. And that's normally where you can track me down. I just recently got finished probably one of the biggest stories of my career from an online standpoint. We did a story about a little girl named Pim, who's from the city of Pittsburgh. She's been selling a whole lot of Girl Scout cookies and sold over 100,000 Girl Scout cookies and has shattered records, both state and nationally. And It's just been a crazy story. It's been blowing up online. I think we put it up on a reel on Instagram and had over 200,000 using 30+ thousand likes. It's just been insane. It's a really, really awesome story. So check that out if you get the chance. But that is the best place to find me.
That's amazing stuff there. Do check out Josh. He does amazing work. Josh, thanks for joining us here. Thank you all for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, wherever you get social media. My handle is always at Carter Critiques. Read my work in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette by going to post-gazette.com. Find me here on the Locked On Steelers podcast every day, Monday through Friday, on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to this channel to get all of those daily episodes. Back here tomorrow with Jenna Harner here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.